I would say that leasing is the Achilles heel of the apartment business, right? Because we've got great condo developers in Toronto. They're the best condo developers in the world, right? In terms of, designing product, building product, bring it to market and all that stuff. But leasing is really where the rubber hits the road, right? We go back to that example of $100 in rent. That's quite indistinguishable here. We're sitting here in November of 2016, and you're talking about bringing a building to market in 2019, right? We're not going to know exactly what that number is, right? Because the market's moved. Every feasibility study that we've done, the actual rents have been higher, right? Now, they've been higher for two reasons. Number one, when we're doing the study, we have to be conservative. You just have to be conservative. You can't be a cowboy on this. And the second is the market's moved, right? The market's been, extraordinarily strong. So, you can't do a study today and then we give you a number of $220 a foot, and then you kind of grow it maybe 1 or 2% a year or something like that. You can't be growing at 5 or 10% a year or something like that, right? And so leasing is important. Leasing is where all your money is made, and that's the part where a lot of times developers say, "Look, I'll build the building, but I'll go hire a third-party manager and let them lease it up." Well, all right, but you better watch this guy very, very carefully, because all your money is going to be made in that next 12 months, right? And so. So let's talk about leasing speed, right? So just go back one still, yeah. Let's talk about leasing speed. We oftentimes have people come to us and say, my building leased up in 3 months, right?
And they're proud of that.
Well, the rents are too low. I just know that. If you've leased up 150 units in 3 months, the rents are probably too low. That's just too fast, okay? Now, if 2,000 people came in or 3,000 people came in, and your closing ratio is around 10% on those people, then maybe 3% then it was okay. Right. But likely that's not the case, right? So the way that, so first, how do you determine if the rent is right? Well, you go to a market survey first, you get the pulse of the market. But the pulse of the market is difficult to track because there is no competitor across the road. You're looking at older product, looking at condominium, you're looking at different build forms, so there's no dead-on competitor. So the way that I would look at it, I would say 3 things. Number one, is the apartment clean? Well, it should be. It's brand new, right? So just walk the apartment. Everything's in good shape. Good. Number 2, is the salesperson on top of their game? Well, I can determine that too by mystery shopping them, right? So and we do this. We send people in for our clients on a regular basis. We mystery shop the staff. We do an evaluation on how they do. Because if you built a beautiful apartment and this person is indifferent about the apartment or tells the person, call me on Wednesday, right, to look at an apartment and today is Friday, well, there's a problem there, right? So assuming that the building is clean, good, like it's everything it's supposed to be, and the sales staff is doing well, you should have a closing ratio of somewhere between 10 and 20%. So I would say 100 phone calls, 60 appointments, 50 people show up, you should rent 5 to 10 apartments.
Right.
Why don't we include that in the slide? When we send this, we'll send the slide deck out to all of you guys. We'll put a little note on here on closing ratio, and that's the way that I would, because look, if your leasing agent leases 30 apartments, right, it doesn't mean they're a great leasing agent. It just means the market's hot, right? If your leasing agent leases 5 apartments in winter in Regina, it doesn't mean leasing agent's bad. It means it's Regina in the winter, and you're not going to lease a lot of apartments, right? So if the data always tells the story, and you need to track the data. And that's the other thing, too. People need to track data carefully, because the data is going to tell you whether your rent is right or wrong. And the number you want to look at is closing ratio. So if 100 people came in and all 100 apartments rented, your rents are too low, right? If 100 people came in and only 1 rented, there's probably a chance your rent is too high, right? Or there's something really wrong with the unit or the person doing the leasing or something along that lines. But that's the way that you kind of think about leasing is on a closing ratio basis. But that being said, for any of you that don't lease up, you're under a lot of pressure to lease up. You've got your construction financing, which is a higher interest rate. You've got your mezz financing, which is a quite high interest rate, and you need to get your takeout financing to get it done. So you got to get full too, right? So it's a bit of a balance act, but leaving a lot of chips on the table is never a good idea, because then you go to get your takeout financing and your rent's $2 a foot when it should be $220 a foot, right? So you're not going to get as much money. And now you put, with the rates the way they are today, you want to put 10-year financing on it, you're kind of locked into that amount, right? And then you want to take your money out and move on to another deal, and things like that.
So let's move on to the next slide. What does this mean?
Yeah, okay, so this is an apartment building. This is an apartment building that's wrongly leased up. All the lower floors are rented. Okay, that's why I've colored them in. I'm just trying to make a point here, right? So clearly the guy has put maybe too high a view premium on it,
right?
And he's put a $500 view premium on. No one's going to pay that for the view premier. So that's what I'm saying. You want to look for, or actually what's more common is that the whole 09 row will be leased up. Developer releases the building, goes away on vacation, comes back, all the 09s are gone, or all the 1-bedrooms are gone. You haven't priced it properly, right? And so to really do this thing properly, you need to be looking at your closing ratio almost on a unit-by-unit basis. Because you could think, oh, my closing ratio is 10%, I'm doing great. But no, we just leased up all the 1-bedrooms, there's nothing else left, right? So you want to be looking at this thing from the numbers, but you also want to be looking at this thing graphically. Let's go to the next slide there. Okay, so that would be right. Can everyone see that? But that's a checkerboard, right? So what you need to be doing is you need to have a checkerboard. Some low, some high, some middle, and so on. But what typically happens, and we've done now, a lot of lease ups. It doesn't always go this way, but the majority of the time it goes this way. The big expensive units lease up, and the small cheaper units lease up, and you lease to the middle. Just generally speaking, that's what happens. Because there's that luxury guy out there looking for that, and you don't have that many big luxury units, right? So this one building we're talking about that we have in London, the average square footage is 1,500 square feet.
Wow.
Right? Massive, massive. You have a beautiful building, all of you would live there, right? Rent's $1.60, $1.70 a foot, but it's still a pretty big nut for London, right? The units on the top floor are between $5,000 and $7,000, right?
One first, no?
Yeah. Those units are almost all full, right? I'm talking about Tony's building here, Cat's Voice, right? So it's almost full, right? And so there's a market in London for $5,000, $7,000 units. Who knew? Now, there's only 10 of them, right? And then the smaller units went first because it's a great building.
Right.
So the people who are price-driven will say, well, I'll give up space for quality, right? It generally goes that way, but you do need a mix of apartments. So you need some smaller 2-bedrooms for price-sensitive people, and then you need some larger 2-bedroom apartments for people coming out of houses that have lots of money but don't want to give up the furniture, or want to have an extra room for the kids, or just can afford the space. Lease up is a critical time. And developers, being developers, tend to give it short shrift, and they shouldn't, because this is really where all the money's made. You can't save 10% on your construction costs in all likelihood, okay? You drive 10% more revenue by really getting this part right. It's a massive difference in terms of your profitability on the deal.